very good morning to everyone here who made a conscious and obviously correct decision to spend their lovely Saturday morning at Vidarbha Literary Festival. My name is Aditi, and if there is one thing I can assure you today, it is that over the next 2 days, we are going to witness a number of incredible authors who have taken their precious time out for a humble literary festival. Do you know how a festival is more than a celebration? Every festival has a purpose. The purpose of our festival, the theme of our festival is inclusion. And more on that very soon. First of all, let me begin by thanking our sponsors, our gold sponsors, Calderis, our silver sponsors, Dalmia Cement, Bajaj Steel, Infocepts, and Spacefoods. A big thanks to our partners, AD's Photography, Refuge, Billboards, SA Digital, The Hitwad, Crossword, Times of India, Helplink Charitable Trust, Alag Angle, Thinking Birds, and Manish Bagalkote. We are also very thankful to our generous patrons Anand Sancheti, Vijay Fanshikar, Advocate Sunil Manohar, Ramakrishna R, Tanvi Mirza, Advocate Anand Jaiswal, Vinita Maheshwari, Shyam Agrawal, Ajay Agrawal, Shantanu Gadre, Priyanka Kothari, Ruta Dharmadhikari, Vinay Sada, our chair Hemant Lodha, co-chair Jitendra Nayak, and our secretary Sachin Jahagirdar. Without their support and their patronage, our festival would not have been possible. Now that I have been properly grateful, I would like to extend a very warm, heartfelt welcome to everyone present here. We at Vidarbha Literary Festival call our audience readers. This christening has been done without your consent because we believe in the best of everyone. And we have decided to believe that you're someone who reads by choice and not just under duress. It's high praise, please accept it. Vidarbha Literary Festival, VLF, is India's first ever and only literary festival dedicated solely to non-fiction writing in English in India. It's a crowd-funded, passion-driven and completely apolitical space which is inclusive in nature and orientation. At VLF, first and foremost, we celebrate literature. And literature, as we are all aware, is nothing without authors. At VLF 23, we are also celebrating libraries. A library is a community of people, readers, who believe that the best experiences in life are shared and don't really have to be extravagant. We at VLF believe in building a community of readers, and that is why we want to revive the libraries of the city. Many of us are not aware that libraries have evolved just like we have. Today, our libraries need us. They need our support in the form of subscriptions and active participation. We need them to grow, and they need us to sustain, survive, and thrive. Libraries are the reason the previous generations could give us so much. They are a part of the heritage we must preserve. VLF 23 is the doorway to your very own local library. VLF has launched an initiative called Know Your Library, wherein we have compiled information about the various libraries of the city. We have a stall right here wherein you can subscribe to your friendly neighborhood library and start your patronage instantly. Since we are celebrating library, we have made an honest attempt to honor librarians who are the guardians of this precious heritage. So I would now like to welcome the authors in our midst, one after the other, in a bit.
We are about to welcome our esteemed authors and librarians on the lawn for the inaugural ceremony. I request everybody to settle down. This is truly a very monumental moment because a lot of them have been welcomed to Nagpur for the first time. Let's give them a hearty round of applause whenever they arrive. Let's give a big, warm Orange City welcome to the first author that we have amongst our midst.
Join me in welcoming Akai Padamshali with the librarian Aarti Mahajan.
Once again, a huge, rousing welcome to Akai Padamshali and librarian Aarti Mahajan.
The librarians will be receiving the librarians will be receiving a signed copy of the author as a token of gratitude from VLF.
Truly a monumental thing because we have with us somebody who makes word poems for all of us to enjoy, and the one person that they are honoring is the one who stores and safekeeps all of these things for us. So happy to have all of you.
Next, we will welcome Kalpana Kanabrayan, and with her is Dr. Nalgare. Next up, we have Srilata Krishnan with Karan Joshi. All the librarians are being felicitated with a signed copy of the author.
The signed book is a token that the author is giving to the librarian. It's truly a very monumental moment, and we are not appreciating it enough, guys. Welcoming Srilata Krishnan.
Kalpana Kanabrayan with Dr. Nalgare.
Let's give Kalpana Ma'am Nagralis a very warm welcome.
Next, we are welcoming the author Prem Panekar with Vishal Shivari. Next up, we have the author Mridula Ramesh with the librarian Mr. Narnavare. Next up, we have the author Amit Chandalya, the librarian Shivani Balkundi. Next, we have the author Neil Kantan.
We welcome Neelakantan sir, whose session is immediately after this at 11 p.m. at Tamarind Hall. I request all our authors to please be seated on the left hand side at the red chairs.
Join me in welcoming Amit Chandalya, please. And here's Sindhu. Join me in welcoming Akash Singh Rathod, our keynote speaker today.
Big rousing welcome, sir.
Here's our keynote speaker, Akash Singh Rathod, felicitating our librarian, our Dr. Manju Dubey. Akash, please could you join us on the stage, please? Welcome, Manju, ma'am. Yeah. There is one more felicitation remaining. The theme that you have been listening to has been made by a 17-year-old musician, Riddhi Vikamshi. I would love to request our author, Sindhu Rajsekharan, to please felicitate her with her autographed book. Sindhu had no idea this was going to happen, so Riddhi has marvelously incorporated all three kinds of musical instruments in our theme: string, wind, and percussion. Because, as I said before, our theme for VLF 23 is inclusion. So, what do we mean when we say inclusion? Inclusion is translating heartfelt intent into mindful action. It's not only talking about a safe space, but creating a safe space for all those who have felt excluded for various reasons. It's having the courage to actively listen to voices other than our own with patience, humility, and empathy. Inclusion is an honest attempt to embrace the unfamiliar and welcome it into the family. As we have said before, a lit fest is truly festive when readers are attentive, conversations are immersive, and the spirit is inclusive. On that note, I would like to invite our chair, Mr. Hemant Lodha, to deliver the welcome address, please.
Thank you, Aditi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Vidarbha Literary Festival, I welcome you all to the two-day Festival of Letters. I welcome Shri Akash Singh Rathod, our keynote speaker and our special guest of honor, Manju Dubey. I welcome you on this bright February morning, though it's scorching. To celebrate the spirit of inclusion in a climate of unity in diversity. It was 4 years ago that a group of avid book readers dreamed up the idea of a lit fest. It was the best way to bring the world of thoughts and ideas to the many readers of our beautiful city. VLF is India's first ever and only literary festival dedicated solely to non-fiction writing in English in India. It's a platform for an idea exchange, a true manthan, a churning of all that is best and brightest of Indian thoughts and actions. The festival is crowd-funded and patient-driven. It is a completely apolitical space, unbiased in nature and orientation. To be able to organize such a mega festival, we needed the faith and trust of our friends and well-wishers. We found these friends and supporters of our cause of non-fiction for inclusion in our patrons, sponsors, moderators, anchors, and volunteers. We are grateful to our many patrons and sponsors, especially Caldrace, Dalmia Cement, Bajaj Steel, Infosep, etc., who understand that only the written word translates any thought into an idea. Inclusive in nature, our festival is all embracing. That is how we get the theme of this year's festival, non-fiction for inclusion. As we know, India's G20 presidency will be decisive, inclusive, and oriented. Outcome oriented. Our theme of VLF 23 fits in very well with this international G20 goals. According to me, inclusion means giving due space to every genre and due importance to every part of society. Inclusion does not mean taking one side rather than another, but making the whole bigger than the sum of its components. VLF is that platform which is open to all kinds of views, which can help uplift society by increasing their knowledge and thus help in making India a Vishwa Guru again. We welcome all our authors heartily. We hope you will enjoy your time with us. Our readers are eager to talk to you, glean from you, and learn from the immersive conversation they will have with you. What you have written in these intervening years between our first festival in 2020 and now our second after 3 years is truly pandemic literature. VLF is a celebration of hope, a hope that is reflected on every shining face of our many, many volunteers. These young men and women are the backbone of festival. They gather around the promise that they see in such a literary festival the ability to voice themselves in a space that will listen to them carefully. VLF is that space that allows the freedom of expression, very much in continuation of the tradition of Shastrat of our historical times. Though Shastrat, we believe through Shastrat we believe in Anikantvad, the possibility of looking at one thing from many perspectives, and the possibility that one thing may have many meanings simultaneously, where the truth may be different from my truth and your truth. Today, to add weight to our efforts, we honor our librarians. We at VLF 23 wish to felicitate those noble souls who live and breathe books and their wisdom daily. VLF has a new venture for the readers of Nagpur. It is called Know Your Library. It will give every reader the location of their nearest library. At the festival, we will have 48 sessions with 6 time slots spread over 2 days at 4 halls. I thank the publisher and the various agencies who have made this festival possible. Finally, I would like to say that Literary Festival encouraged the spirit of inquiry, innovation and enterprise. We made a humble beginning in 2020 to create a culture of reading in our beloved Vidarbha. We received great love and support from all sections of society, and we are assured that this love and support continues to flow toward us. And so, let the festival begin.
Thank you for those uplifting words, Mr. Lodha. I shall now call upon our librarian, Dr. Manju Dubey, and she's a very versatile person. And welcome, Manju. Thank you for giving us your time.
A very good morning to all present here for this literary festival. I really feel honor and privilege and want to express gratitude on behalf of all the LIS professionals that we have been given this platform to be part of this literary fest. Actually, as the theme says, non-fiction for inclusion. We have been included to be a part of this particular fest is itself speaks volume about, yes, the theme is very much justified. Thank you so much to the VLF team for making us part of this. Really, I was asked to speak something about the how the libraries are relevant and we should work for the revival of libraries. But I feel by seeing all such a crowd that yes, the libraries are really having a safe thing in even in this Google world. As we always say is that Google can find you more than millions of answers, but the libraries can help you to find the best and the accurate answer. Yes, the hand holding thing, the human intervention, where finally the libraries can give you the pinpointed and the you will not get overwhelmed by the overload of information. That is the role of the libraries and the librarians. And really, by being a part of this particular VLF 2023, I feel that I should just speak about why the libraries are still relevant. I have been given few minutes of time to speak up that how libraries are relevant, and I just want to justify that if libraries are the journey from the past to the it is the connecting link between the past, present and future. And if we want to speak about, as the theme says, it's about non-fiction for inclusion. So libraries are the place where you can non-fiction talks about the facts and the figures. So if you really want to have the authenticate information, where you need to go, it's no other place than the library. You will be getting n number of information from the digital age and n number of sources, but yes, the libraries are the places where finally you can get the right one. So with this, I just want to, without further more things to say, I just want to say that yes, libraries are going to exist even in this digital world, because they are the places where you will find the right, authenticate and authentic information. And the library professional, they are really going to give that human touch to the users. One survey which was done by the American Library Association, it just said that around 6.6 million questions are asked every week in the academic and the public libraries to the librarians, and these queries got answered. Not only the queries related to just the academics, it is about all inclusive. Even it is about the employment, it is about some career related things. Everywhere, if you want one place where you will get the free information without any accessible information, and that too free of cost, without any customization and without any differentiation, is the place which we call library. So I just want to say that with all the avid readers like you, and with the erudite authors which I can see here, it's like the libraries are really, really very safe, and they are going to sustain in a very good way. Thank you so much, and I wish all the very best for this success of this VLF 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Manju, for those lovely words. So now, readers, I'm in a fix because I'm supposed to introduce our keynote speaker, and I need at least 10 to 12 minutes to do justice to his introduction, which I don't have. So I'm just going to tell you what really matters. He's practically a superhero. So if you're not aware, he's India's Ironman triathlete. He's number 3 Ironman triathlete. I mean, all this alongside being this incredible author that he is. He's an author, philosopher, teacher, social media influencer. He's edited like around 20, authored and edited around 20 books from, and I have to take a deep breath, political philosophy, law, religion, literature, sports, wine. So it's a long list. I don't think he's human. Are you AI or something? I'm not sure. He has also taught at JNU, Universities of Delhi, Rutgers, Pennsylvania, Toronto, Humboldt, Berlin, Lewis, Rome. He's an international fellow. I'm getting tired now. Ethos, Rome, and fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla. He also serves as advisor to several policymakers, think tanks, educational and political bodies. So now I will get him to speak instead. Please address us with your note, Akash. Thank you.
As was mentioned, I was a professor, and we all fear giving talks after the lunch break because people come back very tired. This is a new challenge, to give a talk while you're cooking in the sun. So let's see if I can manage to hold your attention anyway. I'm going to be speaking, as the program says, on inclusion from a philosophical perspective, and that means a bit reflective, but hopefully not too abstract. If I do get lost in abstractions or lose you in abstractions, just keep in mind that inclusion is the key word, inclusion as a virtue. But the point is that it's not a straightforward virtue, and it's not an easy and always positive process. There are, of course, various kinds of low quality inclusion. So inclusion comes with risks, just as we know the inherent defect of exclusion. You can be included but not recognized. You can be included but tokenized. This is tokenized inclusion is a very common feature for caste and gender-based inclusion. You can be included but patronized, common experience for the persons with disabilities. So achieving high quality inclusion requires some kind of a change of perspective, and what I'm hoping is that the philosophical perspective helps with that. The privileged among us, those who make executive decisions, who can decide who comes in, who's kept out, they often act, or we often act, from a position of solipsism. Solipsism is a kind of belief that I'm complete and self-sufficient without the constant care and attention of others. In fact, as a philosophical position, it even goes so far as to question whether others really exist at all. For such people, acts of inclusion are just charitable or benevolent acts of a self-sovereign person. So I have my autonomy and I choose to bring you in. Now this obviously quite ableist delusion finds an antidote in what's called dialectical thinking. You may have heard of dialectics, dialectical philosophy from Karl Marx or Marxism, or much earlier from aspects of Buddhism. What it essentially does is recognizes that we need others in order to be a self. It is, in fact, the other that constitutes the most private and intimate of ourselves. Think of your moments of intimacy. They are generally with another, with your beloved. And even solitary, completely isolated and alone. You can think of yourself eyes closed, thoughts turned inwards, even alone, when we are completely inaccessible to others. I mean, when you're having your private thoughts, these are thoughts that no one else has access to. But why is it that you have access to your own thoughts? The reason you can access your own thoughts is because your thoughts are spoken to yourself through a language. Did you create that language? On the contrary, that language is a gift of your community, of your others. And so what we find is that our most intimate, personal, solitary experiences actually find at the core of our own person the community. Now imagine that we are not speaking to ourselves. We're engaged in a kind of meditative silence, thoughts vacated. Nevertheless, you're engaging in a learned cultural behavior. And ironically, you're engaging in that cultural behavior in an effort to find your true self. So what dialectics basically teaches is that others are and must be at the core of your own most being. But This is in some ways superfluous because very few of us are solipsists. I mean, the vast majority of us recognize our need for others. However, the others that we recognize we need tend to be our usual others, not different others. Our usual others are those who provide us with care, affection, our social life, and meaning. But different others, out-group others, on the contrary, are generally a nuisance, a bother. They cause trouble, and they don't belong. Now, we happily include our usual others because we're social beings, but we only reluctantly include these unusual others, these other others. And we do so generally out of a sense of charity or benevolence or some other sovereign understanding of our independence, of our executive power and privilege, or we do so out of a need to control. So if solipsism has an antidote in dialectics, does this kind of collective solipsism that most of us tend to suffer from, that we're completely self-sufficient just with the community of in-groups that we have, those who help us and support us and share various aspects of our interests, is there a solution to this kind of collective solipsism? And that's where the philosophy of inclusion comes in. If dialectics have taught that that the self needs the others in order to be itself, the philosophy of inclusion goes one step further. What kind of others the self needs are not your usual others, whether individual or collective. The philosophy of inclusion argues that the kind of others that the self needs to be itself are the precisely other others, the out-group. Now, I did get abstract, so I'm going to come back with an example that will help you to understand this. And the example is quite famous, actually. It's infamous. It's Stanley Milgram's obedience to authority experiments. Now, I think many of you will be familiar with it. I don't know if you know the philosophical background. There was a German Jewish philosopher named Hannah Arendt who wrote a series of articles that ultimately became a book called Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. And this book that Hannah Arendt wrote, or these reports that she was giving, have this strange subtitle, A Report on the Banality of Evil. The person in the title, Adolf Eichmann, was a Nazi functionary, and his job was to collect the Jews from all of the Nazi-occupied areas of Europe and get them onto the trains in order to ship them to their death at the death camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau and Dachau and so on. Now, even just thinking about that, one assumes this must be a monster. Eichmann must be a monster. And yet, what Arendt writes is that actually he's not a monster at all. His evil is very banal. It's very everyday. It's very ordinary. And this got Stanley Milgram thinking, is it the case that we don't have to be monsters to be perpetrators of evil? Can we just be our everyday selves going along with our normal lives? In order to answer the question, he set up an experiment, very famous now, where I'll give you the cover story that he gave because it's quite brilliant. You know, many of us have children, and many of us, if our children don't do well academically, exercise a kind of corporal punishment, slapping or spanking or inflicting some kind of violence on them. And yet, has anyone ever satisfactorily shown a link between pain and academic performance? I mean, why do we beat our children expecting better grades when we don't even know if beating people gets better grades? So Milgram suggested that he's going to answer this question scientifically. Is it the case that pain will improve academic performance? This is his cover story. The actual reason he's in this experiment is for what I told you, to find out if ordinary people will do evil things given the right or the wrong circumstances. So Milgram set up an experiment where he brought in teachers and learners. The teachers were to give electric shock to learners when they didn't answer the question properly. The teachers and the learners were separated. They were connected through audio. The learner was hooked up to an electric shock chair, and the teacher had a kind of shock box in front of him or her. And this box was designed by Milgram. It's very famous. It's in a museum now. It started with 15 volts, and it went up by 15-volt increments all the way up to 450 volts. 450 volts, anything over 400 volts is a lethal electric shock. So the question arises, how many people in this teacher position are going to obey the instructions of the scientific experiment and shock a total stranger all the way to a lethal dosage, shock another person to death? Now, normal psychology tells us about 3% of us are psychopaths, right? People who have only concern for ourselves, no care or consideration for others. And so one would expect maybe 3% is the answer we would get for who would shock to death. Does that sound right? 3 out of 100 maybe. Now it turned out, and study repeated year after year, decade after decade, and even in different cultural contexts with different genders of subjects and different backgrounds and so on, it turns out consistently that it is 65%. 65% is about 2/3. So I want you to look at the person to your left, look at the person to your right. Okay, that's 3 of you, right? You're in the center, you've looked left, you've looked right. Both of those people will shock you to death if put in the right circumstance. But there's something that you want to consider. You are to the left or right of someone. Now, we each want to believe we're the ones who doesn't do this. We each want to believe that, yes, it's this person and it's that person. But is it not the case that it is just as likely us, that we could be Eichmanns if put in that situation, and that evil is banal and ordinary? Well, we have, fortunately, that minority who didn't shock to find out how is it that you become the kind of person who doesn't perpetrate. And in the debriefing sessions, Milgram asked, why did you disobey my authority? This is a scientific study, you were paid, this is Yale University, very prestigious. I'm wearing a white coat, you should follow what I say. Across time and across cultures, everyone gave a very similar answer. And the answer was something like this. I thought about what it must be like to be in that chair. I thought about what he or she would feel like if I did this. In other words, what's happening is that a sovereign agent in the process of making a decision has an imaginative moment where they think about what it's like to be another. And that imaginative moment sparks an empathic instinct, which is cognitive. It's not affective. So there's affective empathy when you're right with someone. The mirror neurons of your brain might make you yawn when they yawn. Or your emotions and feelings might make you cry when they cry. But that's physical proximity. This is a cognitive process where just the imagination interferes with this chain of following obedience in order to interrupt, give you an empathic power to not become a perpetrator of evil. Well, how then do we become empathetic like this? Maybe that's just genetic, or maybe that's just luck. Cognitive empathy, the cognitive capacity to imagine what it is like to be another, to put yourself in the place of another, even if that place is a lived experience of which you have no lived experience. This capacity can be cultivated. And interestingly, for where we are today, one of the crucial forms of that cultivation is through literature. The literary experience is one where you transport yourself into and through books and literature, and it exercises the imagination cognitively, providing you a basis for cultivating that cognitive capacity for cognitive empathy, giving you the possibility of breaking through barriers, overcoming fears, and hopefully permitting inclusion of a higher quality. This is especially true when what we are engaging with or who we are engaging with is a different other, not your usual other. So when you are engaging, for example, in the literature of your outgrouped other, people you have feared, people you have vilified, people that you have scorned in your everyday life, you overcome that through the literary process, the imagination, which can spark a possibility for cultivating cognitive empathy. So what the philosophy of inclusion does, by going a step farther than just dialectical thinking, we know that without others, you cannot feel any empathy. We know that we need usual others for our social life and our basic satisfaction. But if we want to be not just whoever we are, if we want to be the person who we want to be, and each of you wanted to be that one in the center who was not the perpetrator, who instead had the accident of sitting next to two perpetrators. We want to be that person who does not perpetrate. But the only hope of being that person, as scientific studies and the history of literature has largely shown, is when you transcend yourself, transcend your experience, and embrace the outgrouped other, the marginalized other. It is the only chance of becoming not just a self, but the higher self you want to be. Now, this suggests that we need people who are unlike us. In fact, we need people who dislike us in order to grow into that self that we want to be. So in conclusion, and coming back to where I started, we don't include because we're complete and self-sufficient agents who are deciding to exhibit charity and benevolence. No, on the contrary, we include in order to have the possibility of becoming more complete. While we humanize the other that we have outgrouped and marginalized and bring them in, that is the very process of our own humanization. And as I mentioned, literature is one of the key mediums to be able to perform that. And on that note, welcome to the LitFest.
Thank you, Akash. That was nothing less than a revelation, I think, for all of us. And apologies for embarrassing you. I would now call upon our festival director, Mr. Pavan Sada. He'll declare the festival open for us.
I'm icing on the cake. So, after that philosophical inclusion that we've had with Akash talking about the others, which is a revelation in terms of how even inclusion can actually be flawed and fake and superficial sometimes. So when nature gives us diversity through its evolution, culture through its revolution offers inclusion. Literature is one of those initiatives and one of those revolutions that occur in cultures. So to open a book is itself one step towards inclusion, one of the basic acts of inclusion, because it is the first step where you let the other inside you. You let the other influence you. You are at least aware of the other. You want to look for the other. Books enclose a revolution and unleash a revolutionary. That is why prejudice, privilege, and power, they all feel threatened by books. But history tells us that a society that feels offended by books or fears them can neither produce prolific writers nor give us a progressive and a mature society. Then only the conversations are the ones that can elevate this fear. Conversation best happen when they are attentive, immersive, and inclusive, which is what we have tried to do at the VLF in terms of design and in terms of facilitating the tracks. We have here at VLF, we are trying to do three things this time, 4 things. One of them, you know by now, is the library thing, that we're trying to include library and librarians. The other one very interesting thing that we are trying to do is we have put up a quiz, a live quiz, a trivia, which is an ongoing trivia, which is going to talk about all the 45 books featured here and the questions that are based on it. And of course, there are lovely gifts to be given away that you'll receive. All the general readers, even authors, can participate with their or other books. Alag angle painters, there is a huge community of young painters who will be doing live painting across the campus. You would see them, spot them, of course in shades or probably in shades. So then we have a swap book cart. You will see a cart where you can pick up a book, you can drop a book if you want. And then there is of course the food to feast upon. But then one very important thing that goes with literature and goes with all the books and author and reading is that one thing that you see at that back, which is a reading and napping lounge we have prepared for you, a reading and a napping lawn. There are beds there lying there, the pillows, you can go and the shade is enough for you to lie there and have rest and take your afternoon nap if you need to. Because I know some of those books can be sleep inducing if you're not attentive, immersive or inclusive in your heart and head. With that in my mind, let me tell only one thing I want to tell my dear authors who are baked now, ready to tell that to dwell that heat onto their readers. The only thing that I want to like to say them is that if you ever have to say or do something controversial, if you ever think of doing something controversial, if you ever think of saying something controversial, please aim so that people will hate that they love you instead of doing things, instead of loving that they hate you. I repeat that please do or say those controversial things so that people love to hate you instead of hate to love you. Sorry, instead of loving to hate you. Thank you so much for these authors that you've arrived here. A big round of applause for all the authors who have come from across India and globe that we now see. And finally, one of the many things we will talk about, because we are here for conversations, one of the many things that I want to talk to all dear readers about is that the only thing that can save conversations is savoring them. If we try to save them, they are not going to be saved. We have to savor conversations. So let this festival begin with conversations, and I declare Festival VLF 23 open to the readers of Nagpur and Vidarbha and dear authors. Thank you very much. Please, this festival is open.
Thank you, Pavan. I would now request all our authors to please sign our ceremonial book. It's right there on my left. And I would also then, you can start proceeding towards it right now, I think, to start signing it. And after that, I would request you to also, before you have your session, if you could go back to the author's lounge and sign the, we have this souvenir that we have for our librarians. If you could just sign that also, it's kept ready in the author's lounge. And I would request all the librarians here to stay back to collect their souvenirs once they are signed. Sachin is there to welcome you and Pavan is there near the ceremonial book. The 11 o'clock session will be starting on time. So everyone who's here for the 11 o'clock sessions at their respective halls, you can proceed.